Imagine if one invention could turn rare treasures into inbox clutter overnight. That's basically the legend of the printing press. Gutenberg whipped up his shiny contraption in the 1450s, and bam, Europe was drowning in books. Suddenly, every peasant had a beach read, and dog-eared copies of 50 Shades of Gregorian chant were everywhere. But let's not kid ourselves. Before Gutenberg, books were so rare you'd expect each to come with its own velvet-lined vault. Monks and scribes painstakingly copied every word by hand, burning through candle wax and patience in equal measure. A single book could take months or even years. One sneeze in the scriptorium, and congratulations, you'd accidentally invented a new chapter. Enter Gutenberg. His press didn't kick off a literary flash mob. Inventing memes might have done that. Despite his genius, books remained pricey luxuries. Early print runs were tiny, mostly for elites and universities. If commoners wanted a copy, they needed deep pockets and surprisingly buff arms to carry the thing home. And literacy? A printed Bible was as useful as a doorstop to someone who couldn't read. Even with more books, Europe's illiteracy problem stuck around for generations. Overnight shipping back then meant about 2 centuries. The truth is, it took time, and more than just ink and paper, to get Europe reading. New schools, better infrastructure, and the slow trickle of books through markets and monasteries made the real revolution. So next time you drown in your inbox, thank history's slowest spam rollout. While printing did become more widespread, the story of Gutenberg's invention is more complex than a lone genius creating it. Was Johannes Gutenberg the lone wizard behind the curtain of the printing revolution, or just the guy waving the flashiest wand? Ask most school books, and you'll get a portrait of Gutenberg as a bearded 15th century Tony Stark, single-handedly conjuring the printing press from thin air while his cat approvingly kneads proof sheets. Charming story, but about as accurate as crediting Steve Jobs with inventing electricity. Before Gutenberg started throwing printing parties in Mainz, woodblock printing was already stamping its mark, literally, across Asia, and had even begun flirting with the idea in Europe. And movable type? Korea had been busily shuffling metal bits to print texts since the 13th century, meaning Gutenberg was more remix artist than original composer. Think DJ, not Beethoven! Gutenberg's real power move? He blended existing tech like a master chef, Asia's movable metal type, shiny new oil-based inks, and a humble screw press, cooking up not just a machine, but a whole printing business model. It wasn't a one-man show, it was a collaborative potluck spiced with industrial espionage, secret processes, and, naturally, lawsuits. Legend has it that without partners like investor Johann Fust and engineer Peter Schoeffer, the first Gutenberg Bible might have emerged as a pamphlet, or at best a very pricey bookmark. So next time you picture Gutenberg shaking the world with a solo invention, remember, his revolution was more Silicon Valley startup than lone wolf inspiration. He didn't create printing ex nihilo. He assembled a dream team, polished what was already on the table, and didn't shy from mixing a little legal drama into the ink. Printing's curtain didn't rise on a solo act. It kicked off with a chaotic, brilliantly messy ensemble. Despite the innovation, the impact of printing on literacy was gradual rather than immediate. Hook. Imagine Gutenberg unveiling his legendary press. One moment, Europe whispers in medieval Latin. The next, everyone's debating the finer points of war and peace over porridge. Magical, right? Well, about as mythical as unicorn book clubs. Me eith. The popular tale goes like this. Gutenberg invents the printing press, and, abracadabra, every cobbler, fishwife, and stable boy signs up for night school, swapping pitchforks for poetry. Reality check. Gutenberg's press wasn't some magical fountain of literacy. It was more like a very slow group text, minus the emojis. Facts. Here's the twist. Before printing, books were rarer than polite topics at a medieval feast. Most people never saw one unless you counted illuminated Bibles chained to altars. Printing didn't hand out reading glasses and PhDs overnight. It just made books cheaper and more available to those who could already read or afford to learn. Hint, that wasn't most folks. Punch! Literacy rates didn't leap. They crawled forward with the enthusiasm of a snail stuck in molasses. Books don't teach themselves, as every frustrated parent knows. If the press truly sparked instant literacy, Why did Shakespeare still write plays for groundlings who needed everything acted out in Technicolor pantomime? Bridge. The real catch? Society itself. Elites hogged the early book bonanza, while peasants found pigs more appetizing than poetry. Education, social mobility, and politics all had to catch up. Broadsides and pamphlets spread ideas, but communal readings, not secret solo study, were the norm. After all, books don't leap off shelves and teach kids to read, unless getting bonked with a dictionary counts as educational. Moreover, handwritten books continued to coexist with printed ones for quite some time. Imagine waking up one morning to find every handwritten book in your library has vanished, like socks after laundry day. Panic sets in. You're about to call the authorities, or at least your mom. But relax, this is exactly the kind of apocalypse people envision when they credit the printing press with an overnight coup over scribes and their beloved manuscripts. The classic myth. Gutenberg rolls out movable type, and poof! Monks everywhere toss their quills sky high and start support groups by sunset. In reality, old habits die harder than a cat clinging to your lap. Handwritten books didn't disappear faster than your coworker at 4:59 on a Friday. They lingered, sometimes for centuries after printing made its grand entrance. The true story is less lightning revolution and more slow-motion waltz. Printers, knowing people weren't ready for a total glow-up, eased them in. Early printed books mimicked handwritten styles so closely, readers practically earned paper cuts squinting at them. Some printers even tossed in fake hand-drawn doodles, proving humanity's eternal thirst for limited edition flair. Meanwhile, the rich flexed their taste and disposable income harder than ever, commissioning custom handwritten tomes. Scribes didn't vanish. They pivoted. Some became editors. Others turned into meticulous proofreaders of printed books, and a fortunate few took up dramatic sighing as a full-time hobby. Sure, books got cheaper and multiplied like rabbits, but there was no mass handwritten extinction event. The shift from script to print was less a revolution and more an artsy, drawn-out cha-cha between old and new. And just so you know, no scribes were harmed in the making of the printing press, though their wrists might still be nursing phantom aches. Interestingly, printing presses were used for many purposes beyond just books. When you hear printing press, do you picture dusty old tomes and grumpy monks furiously copying Bibles by candlelight? Think again. Let's clear up this ink-stained myth once and for all. Myth. Printing presses spent centuries cranking out nothing but Bibles and hefty books. Basically medieval vending machines for piety. Right? Wrong! If presses only printed books, the world's first junk mail would have been a hardcover. Dear reader, you may have already won eternal salvation. From the moment Gutenberg's marvel hit the scene, it diversified faster than a 21st century content creator. Sure, Bibles and scholarly tomes had their spotlight, but those early presses were also pumping out everything from news sheets and scandalous satire to, yes, playing cards. Imagine monks seeing a fresh deck. So that's why we learned to print. If it could be inked, pressed, and sold, someone in the 16th century Europe was already on it. Broadsides with ballads, flashy calendars, indulgences, and history's first pop-up ads, all hot off the presses before most folks could spell Gutenberg, or, well, anything else. And don't get me started on pamphlets. These bite-sized infoblasts were the original subtweets. Martin Luther didn't go viral by shouting on street corners. He dropped pamphlets like mixtapes, lighting flame wars long before Twitter hit the scene. So next time you picture the humble printing press as a one-trick book pony, remember, this machine was the OG content creator, pumping out memes, news, and drama centuries before TikTok made it cool. However, the control printers had over what they printed was not absolute or unchecked. Imagine a time when printing wasn't just a job, it was a full-on superpower. Printers strutted through crowded alleys, cloaked in inky capes, masked vigilantes, or, depending on your take, crafty villains, of information control. The quill-wielding crowds of the 16th century bought a major myth that these mighty printers could publish any wacky notion or scandalous tidbit that tickled their fancy. If that were true, today's history books would be 90% pirate yarns and potato soup recipes. The Pirate's Broth, issue number 417. Anyone? But reality sobered things up faster than spilled ale. The powers that be, kings, bishops, and no-nonsense aldermen, quickly realized a printer armed with a press could spread dangerous ideas faster than the market's town gossip. Enter censorship boards, grim gatherings doling out pre-publication licenses, flashing fines, and sending invitations to the local jailhouse. Printers spent so much time evading the authorities, they practically invented remote work, centuries before Wi-Fi. Printing certain topics, like criticizing the king or gasp, questioning the church, was riskier than peddling exploding pastries. Even a book titled How to Be Obedient probably needed a permission slip signed by half the guild. It's no wonder a thriving black market of underground pamphlets and seditious books emerged. The OG shadow web, where fugitive printers played a non-stop Elizabethan heist movie. So the next time you casually download a spicy ebook, tip your hat to those inky-fingered pioneers, the original rogues of remote publishing, forever dodging censors but unstoppable in their quest to spread the word. Furthermore, having a book did not guarantee that everyone knew how to read it. Imagine a world where picking up a book actually meant you could make sense of it? Wild, right? Today, we lug novels like emotional support animals and size up strangers by their taste in paperbacks. But here's a plot twist. For most of history, books were about as welcoming as a bear with a toothache. The truth? Widespread literacy is the late bloomer in humanity's garden of achievements. For centuries, reading was the ultimate party trick, reserved for monks, nobles, and that one suspiciously quiet kid in town. Owning a book was like having a pet unicorn. Impressive, but good luck figuring out what to do with it. Manuscripts were hand-copied, trembling under candlelight, making each volume pricier than Grandma's china during an earthquake. Then came the printing press, crash-landing into society, scattering paper like confetti. Suddenly, books went from exotic artifact to potentially useful paperweight. Still, it took centuries of schools, reforms, and overworked teachers before the average Joe could read more than just the dinner menu, assuming it wasn't also in Latin. Today, most books practically beg to be read, provided you have a library card and a decent grasp of phonics. Try reading without literacy, though, and you're playing the world's slowest game of guess the plot. While we celebrate this golden age of accessible prose, millions of adults worldwide still wrestle with illiteracy, reminding us owning a book isn't the same as cracking its spine, which once upon a time basically meant, why bother? You can't read it anyway. The global story of literacy. It's got a few more pages left to turn. Nonetheless, over time, printing contributed significantly to shared knowledge and connections across Europe. Who needs WhatsApp when you've got the printing press, the original spam bot for spreading ideas across a continent? Move over memes and cursed chain messages. 16th century Europe was about to have its timeline flooded. Enter Johannes Gutenberg, wielding his shiny new invention, the printing press. Before this miracle machine, books were rarer than unicorn sightings, and about as likely to show up in a peasant's hut. Want a book? Better have a small fortune, or maybe just kiss your left leg goodbye. Then suddenly, books were popping out faster than a brewer watering down ale at happy hour. Here's the juicy bit. Ideas started hitching rides in these mass-produced tomes, crossing borders faster than monks on horseback ever could. No more secretive whispers from cloister to cloister. Knowledge went viral, faster than gossip, and decidedly less fatal than the Black Plague. Imagine the thrill. Aspiring philosophers from various countries could finally argue, debate, and occasionally throw shade in print. Think of it as the Renaissance's own comment section. Fewer cat memes, more Aristotle burns. Intellectual cross-pollination went full throttle. Scientific theories, poetic moans, and daring religious questions zipped across borders like a Netflix original. Old authorities suddenly looked shaky, because why trust a fancy hat when the ink stains on your sleeves said so much more? The true influencers rocked ink-streaked arms, not sponsored sneakers, and thanks to them, Europe birthed humanism and the angry letter to the editor. What emerged wasn't just a battle of ideas, but a lively, squabbling, pan-European intellectual culture. So lively, in fact, you could say we're still arguing in its comment section today.